welcome to Split. My name is Marija and I work as a local tourist guide here. So I'm gonna give you a small tour of some of the highlights of my hometown. If you looked up Split online, you've probably come across the term Diocletian's Palace, and you may have wondered who that guy was or what it is. So Diocletian was a Roman emperor who lived in the 3rd and the 4th century AD, and he is considered to be a founder of this town. He decided to build this palace as his retirement home, and that's exactly what he's famous for. He was the first emperor ever to go to retirement. He abdicated from the throne in 305 and moved to this palace, which was built in only 10 years. Apart from this, he's well known for establishing the so-called tetrarchy, the rule of the four. He ruled his empire with 3 other people, and this palace is sometimes considered to be a monument dedicated to this tetrarchy. Also, Diocletian is well known as one of the biggest persecutors of Christianity. And that's important for us because our patron saint, Saint Domnius, was killed during his reign. So basically we celebrate the guy who was killed and a guy who killed him, which is kind of weird, but okay. The palace wasn't built like a castle, it was a complex of buildings surrounded by these 4 walls. So it was kind of divided into 3 parts. The northern part here was used by the soldiers and the servants. The middle area here is where the temples used to be, and this southern part next to the sea is where the emperor used to live. So he took the best part of the palace for himself so he could enjoy the really beautiful view. You can see that there are 2 main streets in the palace. This one was called Cardo and this one was called Decumanus, and there were 4 entrances to it. This here is the northern entrance called the Golden Gate. That's the Silver Gate. This here is the Iron Gate, and on the south we have the Bronze Gate. You can see that there are 16 towers all around the palace, and it can be kind of weird if you think about the palace as a retirement home. So why would an old guy need so many towers around it? The palace was built as a mixture of a villa and the so-called castrum, and castrum was a military camp. So that's why there are so many towers all around it. And we will start our tour from the Golden Gate, from the northern part of the palace. Now we are at the northern entrance to the palace, the so-called Golden Gate. But I have to disappoint you and tell you that it has never been golden. So why have we named it this way? We made it up because it was the main entrance to the palace. Now if you take a look at the northern wall of the palace, you can see that there are so many windows in it. That's because the palace is still inhabited and there are around 2,000 people who live inside the palace today, and a lot of the apartments have been turned into Airbnbs, we could say. These windows are actually the reason why you don't have to pay an entrance ticket to see the palace, because it would be kind of weird to charge people for entering their own backyards. The palace has been protected by the UNESCO since 1979, and these people had lived here before, so it would be kind of weird if they told them go away, it's a monument now. And now if you take a look at the entrance itself, you can see that there are 4 deep niches, 2 on each side and a bit shallower one in the middle. So the art historians believe that there might have been statues of the 4 tetrarchs here in those 4 niches, and in the middle there might have been a statue of the Roman eagle, because it is a common belief that this palace was actually built as a monument of the tetrarchy. If you take a look at the ornaments, you can see how richly it is decorated, and there are 2 faces just above the arch at the entrance over there, and the right one looks a bit like Shrek. So those were the spirits who were supposed to protect the palace and the people who lived inside it during the Roman era. Now we are inside the Golden Gate. It sounds odd when I say inside a gate, but it had a system of double entrances, as you can see. This part here would be closed and that one open. And when the enemy would enter this area, the iron bars over there would go down and they would be trapped. So basically we are standing in a human trap right now. There are corridors used by the soldiers all around this area. So they would gather on the edges and attack the enemy down here with bows and arrows, spears, rocks, and my personal favorite, hot boiling oil. So I guess that sounds pretty effective and very gross at the same time. Now we're gonna walk down the street which used to be Cardo. It's this one here, and you can see it's much narrower than it used to be. Back in the Roman era, it was as wide as the entrance over there because the Roman streets had to be wide enough to fit a carriage with 4 horses. Today, it has to be wide enough to fit those tiny garbage trucks. It's much narrower because people kept moving in during the Middle Ages, and they started building their houses wherever they could, so that narrowed the space as much as possible. You will also see the so-called tunnels, like the one over there. And those aren't the real tunnels. Those were actually the houses which were built above the streets, because people tried to use any space available. So most of the houses that you can see are actually medieval. You can also see a lot of richly decorated medieval portals above the entrances. Now we are in the middle of the palace, on the intersection of Cardo, which went from north to south, and Decumanus, which went from the east to west over there. And the square that we are on is called Peristyle. Peristyle, translated from the Old Greek, would mean a square surrounded by pillars, and there they are. They were made of marble and porphyry, and they were actually brought here from Egypt. So that's one of the reasons why it took the Romans only 10 years to finish the palace. I usually say that they were playing with Legos, but really big ones. So they brought the material from over there and incorporated it here. And this is the final result, which is really beautiful, I would say. Whenever I speak of Egypt, I can't skip the Sphinx over there. It's definitely not something you would expect to see in any of the cities in Europe, especially not a small town in Croatia. So that's why people usually ask if it's original. The answer is yes. It was brought here from Egypt in 305, and already back then it was 1,800 years old. Now, if you take a look at her, you'll see that she doesn't have a nose, so her face is kind of destroyed, we could say. And there's an interesting story about that. The legend says that people from the Middle Ages who lived here, they were really superstitious, and they believed in all sorts of things. So they believed that she would petrify them if they looked her in the eyes. They call her the Gorgon, like a woman from Greek mythology. And that's actually one of the reasons why we think of her as a female, even though it's probably a guy, Pharaoh Thutmose III. So one day they came up with a brilliant idea. I mean, you can petrify me if you don't have eyes, simple as that. So they decided to get rid of her face. They didn't manage to, and this is what we have left. So this is actually the biggest and the best preserved Sphinx that we have inside the palace, and there are actually 12 of them found inside the entire complex. Now we will approach our cathedral here, and you can take a look at the beautiful ornament that we have. The octagon over there is the original Roman building, which used to be the emperor's mausoleum, so it was his tomb. When the Christians moved into the palace, they decided to get rid of everything that would remind them of the persecutor. But here they actually went one step further, so they got rid of Diocletian literally. They took the sarcophagus with his body from inside, destroyed it, and dumped his body in the sea, probably. So bye-bye Diocletian, and welcome Saint Domnius. They brought the remains of Saint Domnius in the 7th century, and this building here became our cathedral. Since the people of the Middle Ages already had a building which they started to use as a cathedral, they put all of their efforts into building this tiny bell tower here. In comparison to the 10-year time that it took the Romans to build the palace, it took the good people of the Middle Ages a bit longer to build the bell tower. Actually, it took them almost 3 centuries, to be honest. They kept running out of money, so they would build one floor and then wait for around 50 years to collect a new amount of money, and then they would continue. That's why you can see different styles incorporated in it. Also, if any of the ornaments remind you of the Roman era, that's because they are Roman. People knocked down some of the Roman buildings and used the stone and decorations for this. It was being built from the 13th up to the 16th century, when the final octagonal story over there was added. This bell tower is special because it has so many tiny sculptures and reliefs incorporated in it. Some of them are a bit disturbing because they show grotesque animals, dragons attacking people, and stuff like that. It was all a part of the usual medieval symbolic bestiary, so who knows what was going on in people's heads back then. It might actually be one of the reasons why the Middle Ages were called the Dark Ages in the first place. Now something about this part of the square. It's called Protiron, and it used to be the emperor's porch. The emperor's suites were behind it in the southern part of the palace. In the Roman era, it was completely hollow, but these two chapels were added on the left and the right side in the 16th and the 17th century. So the emperor would come out from his suites and he would stand in the middle on the balcony. And he would greet the people who would gather here to greet him, obviously. People here needed not only to kneel, but to lay down before him. That is called prostration, and he saw it in the eastern parts of the empire. So when he became an emperor, he realized that he could do whatever he wanted, and he decided to be treated like a god on earth, a true humble man, we could say. Now we have entered the vestibule, and this used to be the emperor's lobby. So it was the building which was built to impress everyone. You can see that it has a circular blueprint, and there are 4 niches around it. It is believed that there are 4 statues of the 4 tetrarchs here as well, but the Christians got rid of them too. The ornaments that you can see at the entrance over there are original. And the most interesting thing about this building is actually the ceiling, even though it's not even there. There are 2 theories what might have been there. The first one says that there used to be a regular dome which collapsed, but the second theory says that it had a smaller hole originally, similar to Pantheon in Rome. If you're interested in seeing this building from the above, you can buy the tickets in the Ethnographic Museum. You'll have a nice view of this area here and a very beautiful view of all those disturbing ornaments on our bell tower. They charge only 5 kunas, which is the exact same amount of money which they charge for using the public toilets around this town. So if you can hold it, use the money for this, it will definitely pay off. Now we're in the so-called basements of the Diocletian's palace, and this is actually the most famous part of it. But this is the only area which is free to access, and we turned it into a tiny market. The rest is under the jurisdiction of the Museum of Split, and you need to buy an entrance ticket to see it. So this area here is important because thanks to it, we know what the area upstairs used to look like. They had the same blueprints. During the Roman era, this was used as a storage area, and that's why there are so many windows all around it, these arches that you can see. It was something like the ventilation system. But in the late Middle Ages and even later, this was used as something completely different. Since people started building their houses above, they started puncturing the holes in the ceiling, with this being just underneath their homes, we could say. So if I asked, you'd probably guess what this was used for. To be honest, we're standing in a septic tank right now. But it wasn't only that, it was a real dumpster. I know it's not getting any better. Whenever they wanted to get rid of something from upstairs, they would dump it here. After some time, they managed to fill the space almost up to the ceiling. And later, in the 18th and the 19th century, all that garbage got petrified with all that waste. So it actually supported this ceiling and these arches. Thanks to that, we have this so well preserved, we could say. And I guess some of the stupid actions actually pay for the future generations. But it's an exception, I would say. This area was completely cleaned in the 1950s and it was open for visitors. But still, on some occasions, you can feel the authentic aromas, which remind us of what it used to be. So now you can see what the palace actually looks like today. It's completely different. I mentioned that people narrowed the space as much as possible, and you can see it really well here. So this is what used to be Cardo, and this is what used to be Decumanus. They are really narrow. And this here is the heart of the palace, the peristyle square. You can see the mausoleum, but the thing that casts the shadow on it is actually this huge bell tower. So originally the mausoleum was built to be the highest point of the palace, and you can see it's not the highest point anymore. You can see that there's almost no western wall of the palace. It's covered in these tiny houses, and the eastern entrance here is damaged a lot. So there are a lot of changes here, and as you can see, the palace really is a living monument. So through this short tour, you saw some of the highlights of my hometown, but what is a city without its inhabitants? Nothing. So that's why I'm going to tell you something more about us, the locals. We may seem kind of weird to people at first, but we're not that bad at all. Our life motto says pomalo, which means take it easy, and we really do live by that rule, we could say. Sometimes people call us lazy because of that, but we do get stuff done eventually. We like to call ourselves the chill type of people because we usually like to sit back and enjoy a cup of coffee for at least 3 hours. No worries at all, even if the world is burning, we could say. We don't complain when they call us lazy, but we do complain about almost everything else. Complaining is like a regional sport here, and we are the ultimate champions. We complain about all sorts of things, but our favorite topic seems to be the weather, even though we usually have nice weather. No, scratch that, we usually have great weather like this today. But we have a wind which we call Jugo. It blows from southwest and it brings us rain, which we hate, by the way. We usually get really cranky during Jugo seasons, so try to avoid us then as much as possible. On the other hand, we like jokes, and when someone makes fun of us, we usually join in and make things even funnier. We appreciate sarcasm and practical jokes as well. Do you know how we make friends here? We insult each other and make fun of each other as much as possible. So that's one of the ways to make a great first impression, I'd say. Sometimes when you see two people yelling at each other on the street, it's not an argument, it's probably just a regular conversation. So get used to that. So now at least you know what you're dealing with, I'd say. But we're not that bad in the end. We have good hearts and we will try to help you with anything if we can. If we can't, we'll probably call a friend or a relative who might be able to help you. So please don't be afraid of us and don't miss on the opportunity to see this beautiful city. So in the end, you saw a lot of highlights of my hometown, but this was just scratching the surface, we could say. So the only thing I've got to tell you is do yourselves a favor and visit Split, because there's so much more to see, to learn about this town and to taste as well. So take it easy and come here.